So my name is Hannah Roditi. I'm with Social Movement Technologies. This is the Q&A session where we're going to be presenting some information about the Digital Campaigning Certificate Program. That the third year of it starts, it's a modified form. It starts in September. And today we're going to have a kind of very short Q&A session. We're going to go over a little bit about the curriculum and the lenses we use and the format. And then you'll hear from several alums. Who SMT is, we are a nonprofit unionized movement partner, and we do online organizing strategy, training, and staffing to engage members and win campaigns. So in our first 5 years, we've trained staff and leaders from over 1,700 groups, which we're incredibly, feel really privileged about. This is the third, this will be this fall, the third year that we're doing this group year-long training program. We do a combination of work on campaigns with groups, individual work with groups, and then a lot of webinars and this online full year training program. So let's talk a little bit about why this program and why this format. So, and why even millennials need this. So a lot of people who are very comfortable with social media, in fact, we found aren't yet necessarily used to thinking through how to use it or being experienced with how to use it for organizing, particularly and for campaigns. And so that's a lot the problem that we found with organizing groups, whether they're community organizing or unions. It's really using online tools and tactics to build power as opposed to just kind of having a presence online in different channels. And there's a huge difference. So that's what we focus on. Who this program is designed for, really there are several job functions that we think it makes sense for, and people who've taken these year-long programs over the last couple of years. It includes organizers, communications people, and fundraisers, and kind of everybody who has any piece of that in their group. And a lot of the smaller groups that we work with, people are doing all kinds of different functions. And so oftentimes there's a ton of overlap. So any of the above is really suited for this training. And in terms of the group size and level of development of the organization, there's all kinds of group size. So there's been groups that have a staff of more than 15, let's say, that have participated, and they've had many of their like field organizers and various staffers in on the training. And then there's really, really small groups that have less than a full-time person. So there's a lot of volunteer work going into it. And what's more critical is that the person really wants to learn and is really chomping at the bit to kind of become more powerful in their organizing and in their work. This year-long kind of format took shape after SMT. We had done a lot of different webinars over several years, and even though many of our webinars are 3-part series or multiple part series so that we can go more in depth, what we found is that people often have a hard time coming back to their organization and implementing in a strategic way. Really having a sense of, and one example would be an organization could think that, well, we really aren't as comfortable with Twitter and knowing how to use that, so let's take the Twitter training. But then it turns out that really their priority for their organization right now perhaps should be building their base rather than the primary ways that Twitter is used. And if their base isn't heavily on Twitter, but yet strategically that's where they should be, that's what they should be focusing on, is building their base, then it would make more sense to use a number of other channels and tools and tactics and integrate them with some really smart offline organizing direct actions. It would make more sense to do those things to build their base. So, so that's why we started to experiment 2 years ago with this kind of approach, because it seemed that by having an ongoing relationship over multiple months and being able to cover the full curriculum, the full range of what we think is important for people to know in building power, then groups have people develop a better sense of okay, this is what my organization really needs. And the other piece of it is being part of a peer community, and I think you'll hear a little bit more about this when some of the alums share their experience, but being part of a community that you're coming back to every couple of weeks, and that you're kind of accountable to, and that you're preparing for a conversation with, and that you can hear from and be inspired by, and understand that you're not, you're less isolated in the challenges, the very real challenges that you're facing in your work. The other part of this is that it's a video conference format. So everybody, all the participants, rather than as you all are participating right now, you're kind of invisible to each other. You can only be unmuted if the host unmutes you. In this format, you would be promoted to a panelist. So you'd have a panelist status, which means that you would be in control of your webcam. You're in control of unmuting yourself. And so the result of that is it's much more, everybody kind of sees each other, and it's much more of a community feeling and more of a classroom feeling, and there's a lot more opportunities for dialogue. Why a certificate program? So this will be the first time that the recordings are hosted on an adult learning platform, and you'll be able to check off your progress and see where you are in the program. And there will be mini quizzes, not that we're going to be grading everybody. There'll be mainly quizzes so people can self-assess whether they've absorbed key learnings. And we think that that's really important for, a lot of us are motivated. We've got a lot on our plates, and it's really helpful to have really clear, okay, here's what I've done, here's what I need to do, and kind of it helps you pace yourself. We've done a bunch of research and dialogue with other programs that have had some success with adult learning, and so we're integrating best practices from that into the program. And the last thing I will say about this is that we've decided that future participants from your organization will be able to register at the regular group rate, which is much lower. And the reason for that, so like if your organization pays full rate to get your person in on this training, that will be the last time. And the reason we think this is important is because it's tough. We know that a lot of our small organizations, turnover is always a challenge, and because we can't pay super high wages usually, and it's just part of the work that we do. And so we want to, and so kind of making a big investment in training definitely feels it's tough if you've just trained someone for a year and then they're moving on, or they're moving into a different role with the organization, and it's not realistic for that person to train the next one coming in with all of this information. It's just not, that's not how it works, right? It really takes it's an apprenticeship. So given that, we want organizations we want to make it super easy for organizations to just say, okay, we're going to put you in the same program. It's not going to cost much. We've already invested in it, and make sure it's just available for all staff that need it in the future at a much lower cost. There are two important lenses that we kind of use throughout this the whole process. One is that we look at tools and tactics that are low cost and effective. So that's critical for the small to medium-sized groups that are our target audience. And we're really careful. We don't just want to recommend low-cost stuff that's not as effective. We're really looking at that combination. And there's a lot there that groups don't know about, so that's our focus. The second lens is that direct action organizing is critical. So this is really important because we don't necessarily recommend this training if your organization is not doing any kind of direct action organizing, kind of offline organizing, rallies or speak outs, or going and meeting with key officials and trying to get systemic change to happen, because in an offline kind of way, because everything that we recommend, like all of the curriculum, is geared towards being strategic about the combination of direct action, of offline action, with amplifying it and intensifying it and making it more effective with online tools and tactics. Having said that, even if your group is pretty nascent and you're at the beginning of figuring out even how to kind of organize and do direct action, that is totally fine, because we integrate conversations around effective offline action in everything that we're doing as well. The second thing that I want to mention is goals. So there are 3 goals that of digital organizing in kind of the approach that we take. And this is, these 3 goals really are what all of our curriculum is focused on. One would be engaging your existing base in more ways, on more different levels. The second would be broadening your supporter base by going where people are, which is online oftentimes, right? And absorbing them effectively into the work. And the third is intensifying the pressure that you're able to bring to bear on targets, whether your targets are corporate or elected officials. And before we turn this over to alums, I'm going to walk through the curriculum real quick. So this is the landing page that I think most of you have seen already. The lenses we talk about, a lot of the details are here. Down here, I'm just going to run through this real quick. So here's the curriculum that we'll cover, and we'll pretty much cover it in this order. One is putting together an online organizing plan, and you'll be required as a participant to do this. It's very quick and dirty, like depending on the extensiveness or the simplicity of your organization, it can be very simple. And we're really, simple is good in some ways because it's more likely to happen. And you're more likely to carry it in your head and be able to bring it to implement it on a daily basis. And so we have kind of a template for an organizing plan for small groups and then for more sophisticated groups. But also we'll cover how to measure if what you're doing is working to build power. And so instead of just like tracking likes or tracking retweets and or tracking the size of your email list, we're really talking about measures that really help measure, are you getting more powerful over time using your digital campaigning? Message development, framing, message testing, using Facebook to do message testing, what strategic storytelling looks like, why it's so critical in the context of not just digital campaigning, but all organizing. But we definitely, we think that many groups could be stronger with that, and so we do spend time on it. Online fundraising for organizing groups. And again, here, we're very attentive to the fact that if you're a small organization with a small email list, it's questionable whether it makes sense to invest a ton of time in online fundraising. So for the groups that have larger email lists, we do go over, fundraising series emails, how to do, the fact that it's very useful to fundraise at peak moments, certain peak moments in a campaign. But we also talk about major donor fundraising and how to use, if you're a small organization that doesn't have an extensive email list, then what are the benefits of using certain channels and visibility on certain channels in particular ways, like using particular audiences on Facebook with limited ad dollars, like really using your ad dollars strategically to amplify, to lift up examples of who are the donors, who is stepping forward. And so we kind of cover what makes sense for different size groups. Using Facebook more strategically for organizing. A lot of this is now the kind of ad budget, even if you're a small organization, that you will need, and then how to use limited ad dollars really in a focused way to amplify and activate and broaden your base at key moments, and when those key moments would be. And using Facebook Live, using lead ads, there's a whole bunch of different things that we cover around that. Twitter would be using how to orchestrate Twitter storms. There's a lot in that. Putting together live tweeting teams, and there's examples of groups that an all-volunteer group of 7 people did an amazing thing at a major conference, got a major national article out of it using doing live tweeting. So there's just a lot of power there. Email best practices, digital security. We think that groups can significantly ramp up their digital security by using free tools that are not that complicated. How you implement them in your organization is important. And this, you know, for particular groups and segments, groups doing racial justice work, a lot of direct action work at key moments, particularly with elections coming up, using those key moments where there are real significant threats, immigrant rights organizing. These are places where digital security becomes incredibly important. Mobile power, mass texting, and peer-to-peer texting. So there's, you know, 3 different types of texting tools that can be extremely powerful at key moments depending on what you want to accomplish. So we talk about those, the least expensive tools, the limitations and benefits of different tools. Pros and cons of different CRMs. Those are the tools that you're using to email and for petitions and email campaigns. So we talk a bunch about that, but there's also an extensive recording of a series we just did that goes into more depth. So that's super useful. And that's where the 35+ hours of recordings that are also part of this program become super useful. So that you can really go and get much more in-depth when you need it. Media, getting and tracking media coverage for actions and campaigns. So this includes everything from, you know, how to cultivate reporters using Twitter and also, you know, otherwise, but also what's newsworthy and kind of figuring out how to prepare and craft your action to make it more newsworthy. Optimizing your website for organizing power. Most groups do not have websites that are optimized, like an easy sign up that is top of the fold on your homepage, and a variety of other things. Video is critical now, and the beauty of that is that on video that has kind of low production value, like you haven't invested a ton of money into producing it, it's raw, it's more raw, is actually working much better on social media. And so figuring out when video is most useful and how to train staffers more broadly in the organization to capture what's going to be useful, we'll cover all of that. Using Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, other newcomers in organizing. Some of those are especially critical for certain kinds of demographics, immigrant workforces that use, say, and not just workforces if you're organizing as a union, but otherwise, like WhatsApp becomes very critical. The Chinese app that a lot of Asian folks, particularly from China, are using. So having familiarity with those kinds of things and how to use them in organizing can be super helpful. And Snapchat is fascinating in terms of just using it to advertise with like $10. You can promote a message that becomes visible to thousands of people within a particular 1-block area using geofilters. That's very, very interesting. Petition best practices, building an online organizing committee. So really the best ways to do that, what works, what doesn't work, budgeting for online organizing and other management best practices, and that gets into campaign management using Trello and Slack and editorial calendar best practices. We go over some of those kind of free and sometimes very useful tools. And finally, developing your online organizing strategy. So multi-channel, really coming back full circle to where we started, but now that you've covered all of that ground, really developing your online organizing strategy in a fuller way. All right, so that was a very quick run through.